Welcome back to A Numbers Game with Brian Girdusky. Thank you guys for being here. We have so much to get to today. First of all, we're doing not a one, but two-parter special on 9/11. We're doing one on September 9th and September 11th. The episode on September 11th, I'm very excited for it. We are doing an episode with a friend of mine since I was in pre-K. I've known this girl since she was 4 years old. Her father was a firefighter on 9/11, and those who know my backstory, my mom worked there. So I have a special connection to the day, and I really wanted to have a conversation with somebody as one child whose parent worked there and lived with another person who was a child and their parent went there and passed away. I think it'll be a really important conversation. It's one that I don't think has ever been aired anywhere. So I'm excited for that, to have that conversation, for you guys to be part of it. And it's going to be great and respectful. And I think it's a good way to honor her dad, who paid such a huge sacrifice. And the other episode, it's tentative still, but a listener wrote in and said that they have a relative who was there that day and walked down, I think, like 80 flights of stairs to get out of the tower as it was collapsing. I hope that the relative agrees to come on the show. If they do, we're going to have that episode and have a two-parter. I wasn't going to do a two-parter, but it's the 25th anniversary and it is my show. And I think that this is how I can really, 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 I don't know, pay homage to these people and to contribute something to a dialogue that's kind of being lost over time. So I really hope I will tell you guys very, very shortly if we're going to book for both of them, but we definitely have the one with my friend since childhood, and I'm very, very happy about that. On for today's show, we have the former chief counsel for Senator Josh Hawley and the former chief of staff for Mark Meader. He was the Federal Trade Commissioner under Trump. We're going to talk about the Meta lawsuit about protecting children. It was a multi-billion-dollar settlement. It's rocking the tech world. I've been covering these lawsuits against Meta and other tech companies for a while. I think they're going to have massive ramifications in the industry. We're going to get to that. It's going to be very, very interesting. One more thing about that. I think what this really means for the tech industry is other social media companies are going to follow suit, whether they like it or not. We'll talk more about that when they get back to it. But before we do, let's talk some politics. First of all, there is growing concern among Republicans that President Trump's MAGA Inc., his super PAC, has not opened up their wallets yet. President Trump, since his reelection in 2024, has been raising hundreds of millions of dollars for the super PAC, MAGA Inc. As I said, they amassed a $403 million war chest, one of the largest super PAC war chests in the history of politics. And basically, like they're saying, these Republicans are saying, look, polls look tough, but we have all this money. Let's start spending it, because maybe we'll be able to change everything. Democrats right now are pumping money into these races. If you live in an important swing state, I guarantee you, and you watch television or you're on the internet, you have seen advertisements for Democrats. The candidates themselves have a lot more money than the Republicans do. But what the candidates don't have is these massive super PACs that they're hoping will infuse people with saying, like, look, the Democrats are crazy. You need to back these Republicans. You need to remind everyone what the country was like under Joe Biden and how crazy these left-wing socialists are. And yet, despite us getting very close to the election, this MAGA Inc. has only spent for a handful of candidates. Matt Van Epps, who won his special election in Tennessee, 7th Congressional. They spent for Clay Fuller, who ran to replace MTG over in Georgia. They spent on the primary against Thomas Massie, who lost in his primary. And they just recently spent for Darlene Graham. They spent $800,000 for Darlene Graham, who only won by 5 points. She got a coveted Trump rally. She got $800,000 out of the super PAC, and she was on television on Sean Hannity's show basically every day. All of that was responsible for her win. She would not have won without the Trump machine really carrying her and having her win by 5 points. Darlene Graham is the first presidential super PAC and backed candidate in months of this election. I mean, it's been a long time. And I know some of you are still at the beach and some of you are like, oh no, it's still summertime. What are you talking about? Or you're just getting started to school, but you're not in full fall mode. You're not buying Halloween decorations. But you have to remember, the election, the general election is 67 days away, and mail-in ballots for the military, they go out in September. We really don't have a ton of time. There's very, very, very small window. Early voting begins in October. And in a recent interview, President Trump said he's going to spend a lot of money.
Well, I've raised a lot, and nobody knows what it is, but I will tell you it's about $850 million. And I'll be spending a lot of that money and my own money, but I'll be spending a lot of that money for candidates that I think are good, Republican candidates that I think are good. So when you add the $850 million to all of the other money that we've raised, we're in very good shape.
I don't know where he got that $850 million number. He could be talking about promises made to either other PACs or promises from billionaires made to MAGA Inc. that haven't reported yet. You don't have to file what's on the fundraising until the end of September. So maybe there's more money in the bank than we even know about. Matt McCowack, he is a consultant who worked on John Cornyn's failed reelection bid. He said to Politico that the spend in South Carolina for Darlene Graham actually is a show of force from MAGA Inc., that they're going to spend the fortune in this election. He said, quote, if they're going to spend $800,000 in South Carolina, they're going to spend in the midterms. It's a signal that they're going to make a substantial investment in the midterms, because you don't spend an $800,000 investment in South Carolina and say, yeah, we're going to let everybody do their own thing. This is the test case. But Republicans are growing increasingly worried. It's like we're in Gotham City. The bat signal is up, only it's a Donald T sign and saying, come on, MAGA Inc., let's start spending, Mr. President. We need to get this going. At the same time, Republicans are also very worried about how closely they are affiliated with the president, because his approval ratings are not good, especially in places like Iowa, Ohio, Maine, North Carolina, Michigan, and Texas. That's who decides who controls the Senate. The Atlantic reported that the discussion are underway over how they're going to unload this war chest, this MAGA Inc. war chest. This is the quote from the Atlantic. Quote, one person familiar with the Oval Office strategy meeting put it this way: when the issue you typically campaign on don't move voters, or voters are pissed off at you about those issues, the question becomes, what do you campaign on? Some GOP strategists favor focusing entirely on specific races in an effort to convince voters of the merits of the individual candidates and local issues. But Trump himself has rejected that approach. House and Senate Democrats, the president noted during meetings, will make the entire fall campaign a referendum on him. His advisors told him that this poor polling reflects the fact that the voting public still does not know about many of his accomplishments: the dozens of new stock market highs, a decline in fentanyl deaths, the sealed border, and the increase in domestic manufacturing production. I personally don't disagree with the president on this, because one, you can't pretend the president doesn't exist. Like, you can't just pretend that the White House has been vacant all this time and it's just a coincidence that anything you don't like has happened. Everyone knows, of all the presidents in my lifetime, I think, besides Barack Obama, no one has earned so much media attention as Donald Trump. Now, Obama got mostly positive. Trump has gotten mostly negative. But still, you can't pretend that he's not there, right? So I don't disagree with the president's notion of we have to make this election about me to a certain extent, because it is going to be about me. And I also don't disagree with him the fact that voters don't know what's been going on as far as some of the facts. People are judging on their emotions, and there's only really negative attention. They probably don't know about the fentanyl deaths. I reported it last week. Some of your comments I saw on YouTube and in the emails, you guys had not noticed that these numbers were out there. A political poll found that 49% of Americans said they've heard of the big, beautiful bill, but they do not know what's in it, like the no tax on tip and no tax on overtime, which is life-changing to blue-collar workers. I told this before. I have a cousin who's a hair designer, and she said that the no tax on tip was absolutely fundamentally life-changing. A lot of nurses I know say how important these no taxes on overtime are. According to the Politico report, President Trump plans to spend a lot of the MAGA Inc. war chest touting his victories to lift the overall environment for Republicans. Basically, the thinking is, if Democrats are going to focus on him, Republicans need to just go after their narrative. Republicans they tried this in 2008 with George W. Bush saying, who was, by the way, had worse poll numbers than he does, saying, look at these individual people, not Bush himself. And they lost seats in red states like Arizona, Alabama, Idaho, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia. Like they lost seats in red states. I remember Virginia was a red state at the time. So to a certain extent, I do agree that you need to lift all boats. You need to lift the overall national favorability. But here's the weird thing about voters. Voters aren't as negative on Republicans as they are the president. Like they don't blame the whole Republican Party for all the president's decisions, as they shouldn't, because the president made a lot of decisions shooting from the hip on tariffs, on the war. It wasn't like he went to Congress for every one of these things. Now, they haven't really defied the president, but there is a general understanding that these decisions that are coming from Trump are Trump's alone. And he's walking a very, very tightrope with not a lot of time. He has to tell voters, remember Joe Biden's presidency, remember the border? We fixed it, which he did fix it. The number of overdose deaths down 50%. Seniors getting a tax cut. Blue collar workers getting a tax cut on no tax on tip, no tax on overtime. Manufacturing jobs are finally starting to come back. Finally. And it's not that many. It's a little bit, but still finally. But he can't pretend that they're not struggling. He can't say, look, everyone's doing so well, and all of your fears and anxieties, they're all made up. Because you know who did that? Democrats in 2010. They ran an Obama thing saying, no, actually, any of your anxieties or fears over Obamacare, that's all made up. And they got shellacked, as Barack Obama said it. He has to say, I understand you may be feeling anxious, but stay the course. Because the course is correcting. We are getting there. It's just you had to go through a little tough times before we get to a really solid place in the economy. I don't know if that's going to work, but that's his best bet, while then going after Democrats and saying, look, they want to trans the kids, turn our country socialist, have open borders, protect illegal immigrants over veterans. Like it's got to be one and the other at the same time, while not dismissing voters' concerns, because you can't tell voters that what they're feeling is wrong. Ben Shapiro always says facts don't care about your feelings. Voters don't care about your facts. That's the truth. They care more about feelings than facts. So you have to be very sensitive to this. And I can't stress this enough. There is so little time. Democrats are painting the town red right now with how much they're spending. Republicans have to counter them and have to counter them soon. Okay, next up is my interview with a major Meta lawsuit and all that's changing in Silicon Valley. That's coming up next. John Ehrett is the counsel at Lex Politica. He is my guest for today to talk all about Meta. So, John, for those who don't know, Meta reached a massive $17.1 billion settlement with 47 states and the District of Columbia for violating federal child privacy and state consumer protection laws. Can you tell everyone the bones of the lawsuit, like what was actually being argued?
Sure. So this was a composite lawsuit that brought in a lot of different related issues. Most of them having to do with the welfare of children and teenage users. So the federal child privacy issues dealt with how Meta used the data that it was collecting from young people. And the state consumer protection laws were actually a lot more expansive than that. And those got into questions of addiction and harm and what Meta knew at various times about the impact of its products on young people. I'm sure a lot of us remember the Frances Haugen document disclosures where, there were documents from inside Instagram saying that we make body image issues worse for lots of teen girls. And we know that this is happening and we're going to continue doing it anyway because it's simply such a profitable business model. And so all of that eventually went into a large scale lawsuit brought by not just the federal government, but lots of states pursuant to their own authorities saying, this is an unacceptable business practice. And just like big tobacco, you have to be held accountable.
So part of the lawsuit settlement is Meta is going to change how they regulate. So no one under 18 can access the platform for more than 2 hours a day. They are banning beauty filters. They have the ability to deactivate the algorithmic feed. They're concealing how many likes you have. They're blocking the app from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. They're silencing the app from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and no push notifications from 8 to 3, which is school hours. Does this actually go into to solve what the lawsuit was about?
Honestly, this is, I think, better than a lot of people could have ever imagined getting from a settlement like this. These are very much the kinds of considerations that folks like Jonathan Haidt and other experts in the field have been saying are the driving issues, especially with young people's relationship to these platforms. The fact that there are these features that have been keeping people so plugged in for so long, and the fact that they've now managed to secure these via settlement is a big win for the folks who have been concerned about this issue for a long time. Whether or not this is necessarily dispositive or it solves the issues for all time, I think it's kind of a wait and see thing. But this goes well beyond any of the proposals that when I was working in Congress, we even saw as remotely within the realm of possibility.
Wow. Okay. So why do you think Meta settled? Because they had lost two lawsuits, one in Kentucky and one in New Mexico. They had a lot more going on, but Meta is a massive company. They have the ability to keep a lawsuit going forever with their lawyer, with their legal team. This was about 10% of their annual revenue that from last year that they had to give over 25% of their operating income. So why do you think they had settled?
There are a few different reasons for this. The first one is there's been a sort of death by a thousand cuts issue where, at least in the New Mexico litigation, that was about child sexual exploitation. And so that presented a different set of issues than the consumer protection and privacy considerations that were at issue here.
Oh,
There
so
are,
that lawsuit's still going forward?
sorry, which one?
That lawsuit's not a part of this lawsuit?
That's a separate one.
Oh, I
Separate.
didn't know that. Okay, I'm sorry. Yep.
And so as a result, lots of different state attorneys general and private litigants have been seeing this huge opportunity to go after Meta on creative legal theories that previously weren't developed in as at great length as previously had been. And a lot of them have succeeded in getting a really unfavorable discovery against Meta that have disclosed what the company knew and when. From a company's perspective, that's incredibly bad PR, and it's simply getting worse. This is a very different environment than it was 10 years ago when I first started working on these issues. The groundswell in culture has really turned against a lot of these platforms, and I think the company's smart enough to see the writing on the wall. Additionally, as part of this settlement, there's a release of claims. So the various plaintiffs in this action, so the various states and DC and the territories, they're relinquishing the right to continue pursuing their claims on consumer protection grounds. And a lot of the consumer protection claims, the amounts of money that can be involved there are truly staggering, well beyond even a $17.1 million figure. And so as a result of this, Meta will have a lot more predictability what they could tell their investors going forward about what their potential legal liabilities resulting from this might be. And it's a big chunk of their budget right now, but Meta's market capitalization is about $1.5 trillion. And so we're talking about up to $17.1 billion settlement. It's a lot of money, but it's not career-ending money for anybody.
Yeah, it's not going to bankrupt the company. It is, but it is a large chunk of money, especially my calculation was if they continue to lose these lawsuits one after the other, it could cost Meta enough money where they had to scale back their AI investments. If they were losing, the dozens and dozens and dozens, because they're, as you said, these are not the only lawsuits Meta is dealing with. They have cases like New Mexico, which I thought they were part of this lawsuit, but apparently they're separate. So that will also definitely, the legal cost, not only just the settlement cost, but the legal cost is, I can only imagine how many millions of dollars they're paying. Part of this settlement also includes the Cambridge Analytica lawsuit. Why is that lumped in together?
That's a data management type lawsuit, and that's very much the gravamen of the claims in this case is how Meta dealt with the data that it collected and what its responsibility was to various consumers in terms of disclosure, in terms of young people, and how much control people had over their information, and whether that was circulated to third parties or not without their consent. That
Oh.
goes into the data claims that they were trying to resolve here. So this case was really about Meta's data collection practices that they've been doing for however long a time, and the ways in which that has dovetailed with the addictive effects of these platforms on young people.
Now, states are also going after other social media apps. Florida is very famously going after Snapchat. Snapchat, I read a piece not too long ago that Snapchat's the number one place minors go for buying drugs at this point. Um, does this settlement open the door for other social media app companies and how they're using data and selling data? Because I can't imagine that Meta was the only one doing this.
I think this is blood in the water, at least as far as companies like Snap go. And interestingly, Florida did not join the settlement against Meta. So Florida wants to continue pursuing its claims against Meta and be even more aggressive than this result is. But an interesting dimension of this that's probably worth reflecting on is the fact that a lot of young people have been migrating away from platforms like Facebook and even Instagram to a certain extent. So to the extent that they're moving to places like Snap and TikTok and other areas, those companies are obviously going to be looking at this settlement thinking, wow, unless we don't make some changes promptly, we could be facing this level of scrutiny from states and from DC and other places that could pose a pretty significant risk to our business model. Not all those companies have 1.5 trillion market cap.
Right. I mean, that's true. They all have a lot of money, but no one has really Meta money. So you think it will cause a ripple effect within the industry?
And yeah, and in fact, that's part of what Meta's trying to accomplish here, because at least $5.3 billion of their settlement is conditional upon YouTube and TikTok implementing similar policies. And so I think it's today, they're running ads in multiple papers saying, all right, YouTube and all right, TikTok, come to the table. You all should implement the same sorts of safety measures that we've just done. We will provide more money to mitigate the harms of what our platforms have done if you all come to the table as well. It's an interesting way of trying to get around the fact that Congress and the FTC and other venues have not passed a regulatory framework governing these platforms. So we're sort of having regulations being bootstrapped through this kind of settlement framework that, if Meta gets its way, would be applicable on an industry-wide basis.
And YouTube, for those who don't know, YouTube is owned by Alphabet, which is Google. Who owns TikTok?
TikTok's owned by a company called ByteDance, which is a Chinese.
ByteDance, right? It's the Chinese. Okay, so and I know there's a couple American investors like who have stake in it as well.
Right.
Do you feel, I mean, you work a lot on tech. Do you feel like this last couple months has been really an eye-opening experience for tech leaders, that they are extremely unpopular in the general public, like much more so than they were even, 5 years ago?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. And I think the interesting twist of this is that we've seen the AI company leaders almost pulling apart from these more established firms like Google and Meta and TikTok that have really felt a lot of scrutiny over the past 10 years or so and have been positioning themselves in ways to respond to that. I mean, Meta consenting to a settlement like this is not something that I would have imagined ever happening 10 years ago. And in part, that's because the mood has shifted so much around young people in tech and the various harms that we've seen from these platforms. But that's definitely not the case in the AI conversation, where the message that we're hearing is, full speed ahead, and we need to do this to beat China. So Sam Altman and Dario Amodei might be looking at this and thinking, maybe 10 years from now, we'll be facing something like this. But they don't seem to be feeling the same kind of public pressure yet as the more legacy social media brands seem to be.
Sam Altman was almost assassinated this year, which is like the story that no one really covered. It was very close to being assassinated. It was like a matter of a few seconds that would have been life-changing in his case. I think between these lawsuits, which there are many of them for many of these companies, and they have been more successful than lawsuits were in the past, because for the past 10 plus years, their Section 230 protected them basically whole cloth from any kind of accountability, especially when they were censoring conservatives. Your old boss, Josh Hawley, was a very big leader in that entire effort. But that was protecting them whole cloth. These lawsuits have been much more successful. In the case of Snapchat, in the Florida case, they were told Section 230 does not protect them as a platform whatsoever. The first judge did anyway. And they were entered into discovery, discovery is always where things get kind of really dicey for some of these companies. And Mark Zuckerberg, who really was resistant to any kind of change for a very long time, is ironically the leader of kind of ushering change, which I never would have thought was possible. I mean, Kara Fisher, who I'm not a huge fan of, but she does make a smart point every once in a while, said, she's like, we're all dealing with the education of Mark Zuckerberg as he changes over time from one position to the other, and like we all have to live with it.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned the Section 230 angle here, because I'm honestly surprised that argument has dropped off the radar so much, because 4 or 5 years ago, that was all we would hear when the question of social media regulations was even in the mix at all. It was very ambitious construals of Section 230 as well, such as the First Amendment or Section 230. All of these design decisions that are made by these platforms are either expression or they're facilitating other users' speech in such a way that various immunities apply to this. And that doesn't even seem to be something that they're willing to put a lot of eggs in that basket anymore. But this settlement is essentially a concession. They're not going to stand on an argument. And
Do you know why that is, that they changed that argument on Section 230?
I think they probably can tell that if they continue to rest on that argument, there will be ongoing momentum to change that in Congress. And every time a tech bill has been coming up for the last 10 years or so, it gets closer and closer to actually being passed, something that would really have radical implications for how the industry does its business. And securing a settlement like this and voluntary industry norms is definitely going to be more desirable for them than something that's backed up with a lot of legal teeth and or strips away a really important immunity to them like Section 230. If Section 230 immunity went away, their entire business model would be in a completely different place. And so if they're looking at possibly the end of Section 230 or a settlement like this, then the smart money is on taking the settlement.
Well, because if Section 230 went away, and this is my understanding, so maybe I'm wrong, it would also open up to civil liability from individual users, not just states and municipalities, which if everyone had the chance to sue Meta, I mean, there would be 20 million lawsuits filed in a single day, probably.
Oh, man, absolutely. Every time somebody insults you on Meta and you don't think it's true, then Meta could be on the hook for that.
Right, exactly. So do you think that this will kick the can further down the road from any Section 230 reforms in Congress?
I think this definitely takes the wind out of a lot of tech regulation proposals because as happy as I am to see that these changes have been made and they're good changes, I think this makes it very easy for Congress to say, look, industry self-regulation is the way to go. This is awesome and nothing to see here.
Aside from your old boss, Josh Hawley, who are some leaders on tech regulation in Congress? Because we're seeing right now with the AI companies, with the cryptocurrency companies, them spending millions on trying to change these election outcomes, and they've been more successful than not. They don't have 100% record, but they've been more successful than not. Who are some people that are actually very thoughtful in this space?
Senator Blackburn was a really powerful voice on this for a long time.
She's retiring, yeah.
Senator Britt is really emerging as somebody who cares a lot about these issues and willing to pick up the torch. My old boss really had a lot of great things to say about working with Senator Durbin as well on the other side of the aisle.
He's retiring.
No.
And Klobuchar, but she's retiring as well. So really, they're dwindling by the numbers.
Our last hope might be that John Ossoff, who's expressed interest in this space as well, can, on the Democrat side, take up this mantle.
That's really, really funny. Okay, John, where can people go to follow your work and what you're doing, what you're working on?
Well, I'm on Twitter at John Ehrett, all one word, and you can find me at the Lex Politica as well.
All right, John, thanks for coming on this podcast. I appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Now it's time for the Ask Me Anything segment. If you want to be part of the Ask Me Anything segment, email me Ryan@numbersgamepodcast.com. That's Ryan@numbers, plural numbersgamepodcast.com. First question is from Robbie. Robbie says, I continue to enjoy your podcast, mention it frequently to friends, and provide your info you discuss. As you should. Please, everyone, tell your friends and family, listen to this podcast. Let's grow this channel. I'm hoping for it. It's why I'm working so hard. You write, living in North Carolina, it seems as a foregone conclusion that Roy Cooper is likely to be our next senator. With flipping the seat, do Democrats have a better chance at flipping the Senate? It also appears most people have already been calling the House for Democrats, though not with a significant margin. Maintaining the Senate would be a key to continue some things going under the Trump administration. Just wondering your thoughts. Yeah, so it's ironic. North Carolina is not the hardest seat to win based on how it previously votes, but it's the worst polling wise because Susan Collins is doing a much better job in Maine than the state would suggest that she should be doing. I would say that the House looks like it's a foregone conclusion, but we don't know what the numbers look like yet. We don't know if it's a 205 Republican seat, 213, 215, 211. That 10 seats that are the buffer, 10 to 11 seats that are the buffer, that's really what's going to make it much harder for Hakeem Jeffries to govern, because then all you need is one or two Democrats who don't like this deal or that deal, either because they're more conservative or they're more liberal. And it becomes a very difficult situation for Democrats. The Senate side, I think everyone's kind of baked it in that we're going to lose North Carolina. I don't think that that's what's the worry. I think the worry really is people have baked in that we can win. We are going to lose North Carolina. Susan Collins is an undecided entity within Maine politics, within the national environment. So it's still a question, although people who are predicting the election are saying she's going to lose. They've said that she's going to lose basically every election, or the most recent couple elections, and she's won them all pretty handily. So I leave that up to fate. The question really comes down to Texas, Ohio, Alaska, and Michigan. Those are the states that are the most important and the biggest test for Republicans. I just got a call today from a congressman in Texas who is very worried about that state. So I don't know. I mean, that's really where it is. Everyone's kind of baked in about North Carolina, though. Next question comes from Robert. Robert writes, "Hey, Ryan, big fan of your show. It's always my first listen when a new episode comes out." Thank you so much, Robert. I do this show for people like you. I really do. I mean, that sounds corny, but it's true. What's going on with the Georgia Senate race? I understand why Ossoff is favored since he's an incumbent in a Democrat-favored environment, but I'm also more bewildered how everything indicates it will be a shoo-in for him. Given that Georgia is a reddish state or purplish at best, it's really a purplish state, but that's okay. Mike Collins seems to be a generic Republican, and Democrat Senate wins since 2020 can arguably be due to unique extenuating circumstances. Why is Collins struggling so much with fundraising, and the race looks like a done deal when the governor's race, which is much more competitive? Has Ossoff really set himself out as such a talent in one term? Is the Georgia GOP just going all in on the governor's race? Okay, so one of the big differences is that Jackson, who is the Republican nominee for the governor's race in Georgia, is a billionaire. So he's spending $100 million of his own money, which is why it is more competitive. And actually, President Trump recently contacted his primary opponent and offered him an ambassadorship for him to endorse Jackson. There's a lot of bad blood, but he's trying to mend everything in Georgia. And Kemp is all in on Jackson. I mean, Kemp is personally campaigning for Jackson and using his positive favorability in the state. All of that's working in Jackson's favor, but also governor and senator are two different things. We have a governor right now who sticks it to Trump. Collins, the Republican nominee for Senate, is a close ally of Trump. He's very, very, very right wing. And here's the problem with a state like Georgia. Georgia is Virginia, but it's 2007, 2006. Like, they don't know how the Republicans who represent parts of the state represents parts that are like R plus 20 in a state that's like R plus 1. They don't understand how moderate the state has really become. And Ossoff has a ton of money, and Collins is not campaigning, is not winning over favorability because he's not really moved much in the polls. He's invited a lot of controversy. I like him personally. I've talked to him many, many times. But that's really the reason why he's not. At this point, they're looking around, they're assessing who can win and who can't. And they just feel like he can't. So they'll spend money for him. They will throw money at him to make sure that Ossoff doesn't have this massive victory. But that's really the reason why. I mean, all those issues. I'm trying to be very kind, by the way. Next question comes from Shelly from Texas. She writes, "There's so much discussion regarding population decline and Gen Z not getting married and having kids. I realize there's an obvious economic reasons for this, but I also think it's cultural. I believe that the mothers of Gen Z and younger millennials need to encourage marriage earlier on. Tell your daughters how much you loved being a mom and how great motherhood is. Tell your daughters that you will be willing to babysit. Absolutely. Discourage abortion. I told my daughters early on that if they got pregnant as a teenager, don't get an abortion. I would help raise the baby. You're a sweet woman. I don't know you, but you're a sweet woman. The older generation needs to step up. Also, I believe music and movies are impacting the decline as well. Am I off base, or do you totally agree?" I agree a large extent. Look, the decline in fertility is cultural largely, and you're seeing it in countries where there's tons of benefits for people to have kids. Poland and Italy and these other countries have offered, and Hungary have offered enormous benefits, and it has not moved the needle. South Korea is actually going through a baby boom right now, a very small one, but they've gone from like 0.79 children per woman to like 1 child per woman, which is a baby boom in South Korea. They're spending I think 15% of the GDP right now on trying to encourage like women to have kids. Like, it's so important at this point. So aside from doing that, though, it is a bit about cultural stuff. Look, Gen Z and millennials definitely have certain things better off than their parents did. Certain things are worse off. What they don't have is what they do have that is much different, though, is higher expectations personally and that the world brings out of them. I grew up when my parents had me, they were 23 years old and 24 years old, respectively. We lived in my grandma's basement. We didn't have $2 to rope together. I did not know we were poor growing up. I did not know we were working class. My parents we didn't go on any fancy vacations. We never went to Europe or anything like that. We went to the Jersey Shore. We went to upstate New York. Like, we did things like that. One year we did Disney World. We did do that once when I was a kid, but like, we didn't do fancy stuff because my parents didn't have money. I didn't know we were poor. There are a lot of people I speak to, young people, where I'm like, are you going to get married and have kids? And they're like, well, I can't afford to yet. And I think that logic, I'm not saying it's a bad logic, but I think that logic really feeds into it of what do you expect. Also, I agree with your point about, like, look, raising kids is really hard. And there are tough days especially I think the first like 5 years. There are moments where you're like, oh man, Lord help me, stop me from day drinking. But there are that kind of like the overall for lack of a better term, for those who remember the TV show Married with Children, feeling of having kids, like, it's so hard, it's so tough. I think that does take the wind out of the sails. Like, oh, if I have to deal with this hard time, I'll just do it later on in life and I'll enjoy my 20s or my 30s. There's all that going on. Also, I think that there was a bit interview. I wanted to do this episode, but so much time has passed, it doesn't really matter. But Allison Janney, the actress from The West Wing and from Mom and from all those movies, she recently said that she didn't realize into her late 40s that she couldn't have kids. I think there's not an honest conversation going on with people about their fertility. I don't think women know how significant the drop off is after 30. It is a huge drop off. I'm not saying everyone needs to have children. I am saying you should have an honest conversation about if that is something you want to do. You need to, one, if you're a woman, take it as seriously as you take your career. And two, start dating for marriage by 25. You're not Carrie from Sex and the City. You're just not. Like, no one is. It's all fake. That you're not Rachel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, from Friends. Like, you're not, this is not like those 90s sitcoms and 2000s and early aughts of like, oh, you can just do this until like you're 39 and then pop out a perfectly healthy baby and then date a doctor. That's a TV show. That's not real. Anyway, yes, I think I agree. It's probably cultural. Last question comes from Keith. Keith says, love this podcast because you call balls and strikes and do not sugarcoat things, even if the message is not good for the GOP. Thank you. I try really hard to have some integrity and tell the truth. Was listening to one of your episodes and you were going on about the GOP issue with polls. You mentioned that the GOP spigot for ad buys was starting to open to combat the trend. It appears the GOP is consistently starting running ads later than Dems. That is at least what I've seen in Houston. Why do they always seem to be behind? What is the strategy to timing ads early versus later? Are there any studies to show when is the best phase to begin an ad for a campaign? Okay, so there's no studies. I am a person who, when I run a campaign, I like to define my opponent very early on. The problem with that is people forget and half of them are paying attention. I think that right now the Republicans are a little behind from when they should be spending. I think they should have been spending a little earlier. It's all based there. So there's no studies. It's really what you feel from the campaign to the campaign. When I worked on the super PAC for Vance's campaign for Ohio Senate, I wanted to go after our opponents like very quickly. I wanted to start knocking on them as soon as possible. And my boss at the time, Luke Thompson, was very much like, let's hold our powder dry, and came in with ads at the peak moment that people are paying attention. And he was right. He was 100% right. I was wrong. That doesn't always work. Romney tried that and Obama successfully branded him. I think the question of how much attention the campaign is getting matters quite a bit. And I think right now we're seeing that, unfortunately, with Paxton in Texas, is that they've branded him. I mean, he had this brand a little bit before him, but they branded him a crook, and Tallarico has doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on that. And that has really hurt him with the eyes of the voters. They do not like him because they view him as a crook. I think that response should have happened sooner. And now the Ted Cruz ad just finally came out that I mentioned in the last episode, and they're trying to now brand Tallarico. A lot of voters still don't know who Tallarico is in Texas, believe it or not. Like 25 to 30% don't have an opinion on him. They're trying to win over that 30% and inch away at the people who view him favorably, and that will hopefully give them their margin. Maybe they could do it, but they're going to have to spend a lot in a very short period of time and hope that it sticks. Can it? Yes. Is it guaranteed? No, but nothing in politics is. I always say politics is, the classes for political science. Politics is neither an art nor science. It's somewhere in between. So that's just how that works. But that's why they're doing it so late. They want to do it when peak people are paying attention, and they want to flood the ad buys where they're putting 8,000 to 10,000 points per ad. And that's a lot. So, all right. That's this episode. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And please subscribe on YouTube. Tell your friends and family you want to grow this channel. I will talk to you guys on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend.